Gardening 101 and going to talk about Market Gardening 101. And basically, we're going to talk, when I say 101, I just mean like the things that I think sometimes are overlooked in terms of what to focus on whenever we are talking about market gardens or market farms. And primarily, we're going to be talking about market. You're probably going to hear me say market about 100 times today, so just get ready for that. But a little bit about myself, I guess, my background. So I'm from Georgia. That's the accent. If anyone here is from Georgia, you are lucky and you'll get to understand every single word I say. Everybody else, good luck. So I grew up farming primarily row crops like tobacco and cotton in Georgia. And I thought that's what farming was. I thought that's just how everyone grew food, period, and end of story. I ended up in California for like 2015 to 2020 and learned about organic farming there. And then decided to start my own farm here in Tucson in 2020 or 2021. And so we've been operating for about 3 years now. And yeah, so hopefully everybody's kind of trickled in now, and we'll get into the presentation. So, market gardening, intensively growing food in a small space. So let's get into it. So what we'll cover today, this is my front yard, by the way. So this is my farm, and we'll cover, what is market farming or market gardening. I'll try to pick one term and use it the whole time, but if I slip up, I literally look at them as the same thing, market gardening or market farming. We'll talk about biointensive growing methods, which you may have heard of it, may not have. Don't freak out if you haven't. It's just a really simple way of kind of summing up my primary growing practices and what I focus on most whenever I'm doing my crop planning. We'll get into it. And then we'll also finish up the presentation with how to basically build a market garden. Or again, the things that I think are most important when starting out. So we'll talk about market research. We'll talk about crop selection and planting those crops out once they've been selected. And we'll talk about just like some basic infrastructure and tools. I could literally do a whole hour on the amount of like tools and equipment you could buy. But I guess that's just kind of like an old farmer trope, is constantly wanting to buy more tools. So yeah, we'll get into that. I'll take questions at the end. So I'll try to just like do this slow and steady. We'll go through it. And if there's anything that I haven't covered, if you guys have questions or comments, or suggestions, I'm always, that's one of my favorite things about farming, is that I will absolutely never master this. So it's kind of like a never ending pursuit. So if anyone has any suggestions or questions or anything like that at the end, I think we'll have like 10 or 15 minutes to go over them, hoping that I'm not just a total monologuist today and I don't go for a full hour. So we'll see. Keep your fingers crossed. So this is me harvesting scallions that I intercropped with beets. And I have this photo because what is market gardening? Market gardening is growing produce with the intention of selling to a specific market, usually local. The reason I have this photo in there is, again, I'm selling beets. I personally hate beets. I don't like them. I can grow them pretty well, but I personally don't ever eat them. And this is kind of, to me, like the uh, separating clause between like a small homestead or something that you're just focusing on only growing food for yourself, versus saying like, I'm going to make a business out of this. I'm going to really try to make money out of growing food. And to make money in the capitalist system that we are in, you're going to have to sell that food. So that's what market gardening is. And the USDA, United States Department of Ag, classifies farms by their gross cash farm income. And they consider a small farm anything under $250,000. So if you're under $250,000 in income, you are considered a small farm in the eyes of the USDA. I am definitely in that category. Space required is 0 to 10 acres. That's a very rough guess. I'm just trying to give you guys an idea of like rough sizes for a market garden. I say 0 also because, you know, you can grow like microgreens indoors. You can do mushrooms indoors. I think some people are actually growing like cut flowers indoors now as well, like under grow lights and things like that. So you can totally like start this and do this thing in your garage. You don't need a huge amount of space. The average market garden, usually gross income, which means that gross income, just to define it briefly, is the raw cash that you bring in, the total sales, so without taking any expenses out. The gross income is about 80,000 per acre. If you're doing that, you're doing pretty good. And again, so this is my front yard. This is kind of before we ended up expanding the farm out into this direction. So it's like, I call it a quarter acre, or sorry, I call it a third of an acre now. But this was after our first year of growth. And yeah, this is what a quarter acre farm looks like. And the reason that I chose a quarter acre is because I really like this model. I think the average US lawn is a third of an acre. So this could fit into most people's front yard, basically, if they had the desire, the passion, the wherewithal to do this. I think it's definitely doable. I think the learning curve is much more approachable compared to like the classic big farms where you're taking out, you know, multi-thousand-dollar loans to get started. So this is something that I came to Tucson with the intention of basically doing this, of starting my own farm and operating it and seeing if it would work. And it does work. So our gross income for this quarter acre last year was 60,000. So we brought in $60,000 in sales. We had about 15,000 in annual expenses. That's including like depreciation of equipment and things like that. And then I'm left with about $45,000 net income, and I can use that to pay myself. I can use that 45 to invest back into the business. Don't worry, I'm not going to make this whole presentation about just numbers. I just want to show you guys that it is a viable business plan, and I really enjoy it. I think that this might be the way of the future in terms of strengthening the food system and getting more of these small farms spread out into the suburban or urban areas. And that's why I'm here at the Urban Ag Hour. So yeah, enough of that. So let's get into like growing practices, sexy pictures of plants, all those types of things that keeps people happy. So how I grow is bio-intensive. So we can just break that word down. It is basically bio, so intensive life. So we're just trying to put as much life and plants in the ground as possible. So planting crops in a way that maximizes yield for your growing space. And these are kind of the three main tenets that kind of guide me in these growing practices. Number one, we want tight plant spacing. If you look on the back of most seed catalogs or seed packets, you will see like, for example, like they would space these radishes that I have right here. So these are radishes intercropped with 4 rows of scallions. They would tell me to space these radishes out like 2 inches apart from each other. These are sowed at about a 1/2 inch from each other. So they're sowed very thickly. And they're also intercropped with these scallion bunches, which I've basically multi-sowed scallions. And so there's like 7 or 8 plants in this bunch. They'll grow together. And that, again, is something that you won't really see on the back of a seed packet, but it totally works. It can increase your yields. We'll get in more into that, like plant spacing in a second, but that's kind of the gist of it. Quicker maturing crops. So radishes are probably my favorite crop, period. Everyone knows how to eat them, so I don't have to do a lot of explaining at the farmer's market. They're fast. They're like 30 days from sowing to harvest. And And that means I can succession plant. Succession planting means as soon as I plant one crop, I get to put another crop in the same year. And if I was growing sweet corn or something that took like over 100 days to grow, I would have much less succession planting going on. And the more succession planting, usually the more yield you can get out of your land. And then the last thing we're going to cover is companion planting. I put that in parentheses or quotation marks because people have different definitions of companion planting. My definition is very simple, and we'll get into that in a second. But the biointensive growing method, like I think it's extremely important for a financially sustainable market garden. And you guys may have heard that word sustainable a lot. I think financial sustainability is one of the most underrated things for beginning farmers, people thinking about getting into this, because that is something that maybe we're just taught to not talk about money. But I think you have to. If you want to make a business out of this, which you totally can, it's totally doable. We do need to keep in mind, how to make money and keep our dream alive in the system that we're in. So a little bit more detail on that biointensive growing. So first of all, tighter plant spacing again. And again, I'm just saying tighter compared to like larger farms, larger like tractor driven operations, row crops, things like that. And it has a bunch of benefits. It keeps the soil covered, which reduces the need for weeding, and it reduces irrigation, especially here in the desert. That's extremely important for us. I have a very sandy soil out here in Southeast Tucson. So every bit of moisture I can keep on the surface of that soil really helps my crops thrive, and it maximizes yield. So you can see in the picture here, I have 3 different crops growing in this bed. So I have trellised tomatoes, I have radishes that I am just finishing up harvesting, and then I have sweet basil on the outside. So all 3 of these crops are planted tighter than the recommended spacing in the seed catalog that I bought them from. So it can work. You just kind of have to know how to keep plants from getting in each other's way, which we'll get into here in a second whenever I talk about companion planting. So number 1, tighter plant spacing. Number 2, quick maturing crops. So DTM means days to maturity. And so I'm trying to focus, especially at the beginning of your growing career, I try to focus on crops with 60 days to maturity or less, which means that crop from the time you put it in the ground to the time you harvest it is 60 days or less. That's important, again, like I said, for the succession planting, but it's also important to keep the soil covered. So out here, the UV doesn't hit it and kill all of that biology and that life that we've put into the soil. I grow organically, so you don't have to, but I grow organically, so that biology in the soil that I've fed and tried to keep alive, the best thing it wants is more roots. And that's a nice symbiosis for me, because what I want is more yield. I want to get as much crops out of the ground as possible, and those root exudates that are coming out of those plants are going to feed that soil biology and keep it really happy. So it also, again, starting out, you get quicker results when you have crops that are maturing faster. This is you might not, maybe you can see this. This is an heirloom tomato that I picked this morning. It's a German striped tomato. I'm kind of messing with a few new varieties this year. But that thing took forever. Like, I stared at these tomatoes for the last month, thinking they were going to ripen. I usually do cherry tomatoes, which is what this is a picture of. These are cherry tomatoes, and they ripen way faster. And also, if a bird was to come and peck this heirloom tomato, I literally lose like $4 with that one bird peck. If a bird pecks one cherry tomato, I've lost like 10 cents. The same applies for like radishes. Am I going to go radishes or am I going to grow parsnips? Well, parsnips take like 80 or 90 days. Radishes take 30. If I'm figuring out my soil and trying to see like what's happy, what's growing well, I don't want to stare at a bed and hope it's going to do well. I want to know sooner than later, hey, okay, I've got my soil fertility dialed in, or I don't. I need to make adjustments. And those radishes, those head lettuces, those types of things can really give you that response quicker. And it really eases up that learning curve for beginning growers. So, sure. There we go. Okay, so the last thing is companion planting. So this is kind of the last tenet of that biointensive growing method. Goal is to fill open spaces. Again, we're trying to just get as much out of that land as possible. You can see here, I mean, again, I could have just made this bed a radish bed or just a basil bed, or I can make it just a tomato bed, but I decided to kind of do all three. And they all three worked just fine. So what would have been a tomato bed that maybe yielded me maybe $300 or $400 in the life of that 50-foot bed ended up yielding me like $150 just in radishes. It yielded me another $200 or $300 in basil, and then it yielded me another $300 in tomatoes, which was awesome. So I don't mean to sound like a capitalist pig or anything, only talking about money, but we're talking about market here. So yeah, so that's my goal. Fill those spaces, get that land that you've worked and built that soil and put that work into, get it paying you as much as possible. Again, some people think of companion planting as like, oh, onion families don't like the potato family, or beets don't really like peas, or something like that. I think so. This is my opinion, but I think that my primary focus is what doesn't get in each other's way. So whenever I say, I'm focusing on days of maturity and growth habit, that means I'm just trying to make sure they're not shading each other out too much. I want to make sure they require about the same amount of irrigation, but sometimes that's not even a dead set rule, because basil wants a lot of water and tomatoes don't want a lot of water. So in my opinion. But we could kind of go all day about those types of things of growth habit, but I'm just making sure they're not getting each other's way. And that's what I think of when I think of companion planting and how to pick what I'm going to intercrop with what else. Okay, so recapping it. So what we've covered so far is, what is market gardening? We've covered biointensive growing method, and now we're moving on to how to build a market garden. So we're going to do market research, we're going to do some crop selecting and planning, and we're going to do some basic infrastructure and tools. Okay, so market research. This is something that I think it's very underestimated, underrated, especially as a beginning farmer. I definitely underestimated it a bit whenever I first came to Tucson. Yeah, I paid for that. I paid for my sins. So basically, so this is what you're going to look at. So we're going to put the market in market garden. All right. Focus on that market. Focus on what can sell. How can you find that out? Go to a local farmer's market. I like to take photos of the booths that are there. I kind of felt weird about it at the beginning, but people end up just thinking you're like taking a photo for Instagram or something, and they usually get very flattered. So it's totally fine. Take some photos. And usually what you'll see is, number one, you'll see how many units someone has, how much of something are they selling. This is my farmer's market booth, by the way. So how much are they selling? What price are they selling things at? And, take a photo at the beginning of market. And then if you can, come back by at the end of market and see what's left, And this photo tells you a lot. You might say, well, I can grow scallions for, a little bit less than $3 a bunch. I'm not saying you should be undercutting people. Like, definitely don't just race to the bottom here in terms of what you're going to sell and what not. But, if maybe a better example is you can grow head lettuce for $3 a head versus me growing it for $4 a head. And that's something that you could totally try to do and see if that works. And if you see at the best thing to see is at the end of that market, when you take those photos again, if all those head lettuces are gone, that means that that avenue for that crop in your farmer's market, that is the unsaturated avenue. It means that they totally sold out of all that crop, and there might still be some money to be made from that crop at that time. So this is something that I did the first for the first 6 to 8 months that I was like building infrastructure here on my farm. I basically went to the farmers market every couple months, walked around, talked to growers, which they love to do. That was like, I love when people come up and ask me how they grow, how to grow stuff, or like what's doing well and what isn't. So go talk to growers and check in multiple times throughout the season. You know, like maybe no one's growing basil in the spring, so maybe you could plant some early basil and be the first to market, and then you're not competing with anyone. And that's really, you know, again, I don't want to race to the bottom here and like say I could grow that for less than you. Really avoid growing that thing at all if you can. Like, we'll get into it in a second in terms of like pushing environments and using frost cloth and shade net to grow things out of season. But that's a huge thing as well. You know, like try to grow what other people totally aren't growing or what isn't worth growing for them. And in that way, no one's competing against each other. We're only strengthening the food system. We're making our customers happy because we have more farmers at the farmers market. And yeah, so that's another really good thing to focus on. A little bit more higher level way to sell produce is restaurants and wholesalers. I don't usually recommend people who haven't farmed start with restaurants and wholesalers, or CSAs for that matter. If anyone doesn't know what a CSA is, it stands for Community Supported Agriculture. And that's basically whenever you, the farmer, promise a box that's been packed with produce, you promise that box for a certain amount of dates throughout the year at the beginning of the year, and then people pay you up front for those boxes, so you've kind of like guaranteed food. I usually don't recommend that for a beginning farmer because people can get a really bad taste in their mouth with the CSA. You know, if you're a beginning farmer and you have a big radish failure or your tomatoes die or something like that, you can end up kind of shorting your customers, and they'll just kind of not want to buy local anymore. They'll just say, I'll stick to Walmart or Target or whatever. So, so again, maybe if you've been growing for a while, or if you really know a couple of restaurants that just would die for any kind of local food, like go talk to them. That's totally fine. But you know, see what they need at different seasons and see what prices they're willing to pay. Sometimes they want produce and they're like, oh, I would love to have some local produce, but they don't really want to pay a lot more than what's coming off the Cisco truck. So that's another thing to kind of be wary of. Make sure you're getting paid for what you're growing. Here, you know, samples of product go a long way. If you're at that stage where you have stuff ready to go, bring some stuff whenever you go talk to those restaurant managers or those chefs or those wholesalers, and show them what you can do. And then usually they'll just start you off with like some spot purchases. They won't give you a contract out of the gate. I don't think. I couldn't get one at least. So what you'll do is you'll just do spot purchases and things like that. And that'll get you along and get your foot in the door for later when you show consistency. That's when you get contracts, which contracts are great, by the way. If you can get them, absolutely get them. That means you have a guaranteed sale outlet. So this is a farmer's market booth that I ran in Santa Rosa, California. This isn't me. I didn't have hair like that. That's my buddy who was helping me run it. And so, you know, comparing a third of an acre or quarter acre farmer's market booth to this is like a 3 acre farm. They were very diversified. They grew a whole bunch of stuff. Really great farm. If you get a chance to check them out, they're in Northern California. And yeah, you can see like this is a lot. But again, I could, if I was in Northern California and I wanted to start a farm, this is the first thing I would do. I would take a picture of this farmers market booth, beginning and end of market, see what sells out, see what they're selling it for. And that way I have an idea of maybe where I can fit into that market. All right. So crop selection. So how to choose what crop to grow. All right. We talked about market, but what we really need to do is answer like, what do you think you can grow that others aren't? What do you think you can grow better than others are? Okay. And to do that, we're going to create what's called a crop budget. And this is from, I'll have a picture of it at the end of the slides, but this is from Richard Wiswall's book. It's called The Organic Growers Business Handbook. It's the first book I bought whenever I was starting my farm. It is probably the most important book I have in terms of helping my farm be financially sustainable. Anyway, main draw out of that is just we're going to look at these crops in a more pragmatic way. We're not just going to like take guesses and say, oh, I think this will work or I think that'll work. You can see me here. This is in that farm in Northern California. Those are Brussels sprouts. You couldn't make me grow Brussels sprouts here on a quarter acre. There's no way I could make those work. I don't think they take way too long for me, and the market for them might not even be there. So they're a risky crop, but you might notice like, and this farm was a very successful farm, but they had those 3 acres to play with. So the more space you have, the more crops you'll be able to kind of play with and try out and see what works and what doesn't. I hate like making these quick and easy, like cheat things, but like if you just really want to know what some good starters are, I think lettuce, radish, any kind of salad mix, tomatoes, people love fresh tomatoes, bunching greens, herbs also, like herbs are really good because if you're growing on that small space, those herbs can be worth a lot if that market isn't saturated. So basil, parsley, cilantro, those types of things. Those are all good starters that could get your foot in the door and maybe get you selling what people know how to eat. That's another thing, grow what people know. I love kohlrabi, but not many people know what to do with kohlrabi. Some of you might not even know what it is, and that's totally fine. I didn't know what it was till I was farming at this farm in California. So a lot of people just like want radishes, tomatoes, lettuce, carrots. They want things they know how to use, and those things are almost always going to sell a little bit better, at least at the farmers market. Um, again, selecting crops, you want to know your USDA hardiness zone. If you don't know that, you can just Google your zip code with the USDA hardiness zone. There's a great interactive map online that'll tell you exactly when your first and last hard freezes are. And with the climate the way it is, good luck. It really is just like a rough guess, but it can give you an idea of like, okay, what's the earliest I can plant tomatoes? What's the earliest I could plant that winter squash or whatever, and it not get killed by the frost? So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And like I said earlier, we're going to talk a little bit about extending seasons with shade net and frost protection. Again, primarily with that lens of market in mind. We're trying to make sure that we can grow stuff that other people aren't growing so that everyone can be happy. We're not competing with anyone, and we will have a guaranteed spot at that farmer's market or at that restaurant. So, okay, I'm just going to give you a second to absorb this. Don't freak out. There's a lot of numbers and stuff. But I'm going to take a sip of tea, calm down, don't leave. I'll tell you what all this is. Okay, so this is a crop budget. This is a crop budget for radishes, and it is for a 50-foot bed. Those things don't really matter. What you really want to take away from this is we're going to answer this question in a more tangible way. And this is what I got from that book I referenced a second ago. So what can you grow better or more efficiently than others? I had no way of quantifying this until I read that book. And it was amazing how simple it can be if you're willing to just write down some stuff whenever you're out there gardening or farming. So, first thing we're going to look at is tasks. So, what are the tasks that are required to get this plant that you're planting from seed all the way to sale? Okay, so from seeding it all the way to getting it sold. So, these are just steps. And I'm counting the labor, how long it takes me to do each of these steps, and I'm counting how much I want to pay myself. So I wanted to pay myself $18.1 an hour. Don't ask me how I got to that. It was like a workers' comp thing I was trying to figure out. I wanted to be as realistic as possible. Anyway, 18.1 bucks an hour is what I'm paying myself. So I'm counting all that and my total expenses. I'm also counting any type of fertilizer or any rubber bands or anything like that that are you don't have to get this perfectly, by the way. You can kind of just get it as you go, but you just want to end up with a rough expense, and then you want to end up with a rough sales window of like roughly how much do you think you can sell. And this is where that market research really comes into play of making that guess of what you think you can sell. And then you're going to end up at the bottom there with a net profit for that 50-foot bed. I hope y'all can see that. If you can't see it, it's just the top two numbers minus each other. And that should be roughly your net profit for that 50-foot bed. And this honestly helped me narrow down my crop list a lot. I wanted to grow everything under the sun. You know, like I love plants. I wanted to grow spicy pepper. Like I wanted to grow like drying peppers, like cayenne and stuff. I learned those were some of the most least profitable crops to grow, especially on a small scale for me. So what I ended up doing was kind of doing this for all the crops that I thought could work. And then I ended up with this information. So again, you can develop this as you grow, you know, as you learn more about each crop. Just start recording it, you know, just literally have a little notepad in your back pocket when you're out there planting something or harvesting something, or whenever you're having to cover something with shade net or frost cloth. Write it down and just say, oh, you know what? Radishes were actually like really easy to grow. I didn't have to put a whole lot of labor into them, and they sold like crazy. And that, again, is just what can really help you determine out of the gate how to dodge some bullets in terms of loss leading crops. Okay, so real quickly, season extension. This is something that when I did market research here, I learned that people don't really grow lettuce here in the summer. It's not a thing for obvious reasons. It's Tucson, but through using shade net and a micro sprinkler system, I was able to basically push lettuce pretty much all year here on the farm. And we do a cover crop in July. But we were growing all the way through June and then back to growing in August and September. So we're definitely getting those heat waves, but with that shade net and everything, we're able to grow that, and people loved it. People, the wholesalers, the restaurants, the people at farmers market, everyone was just dying to have lettuce mix at that time of year because no one had it. And I felt good because I wasn't competing against other farmers. Okay, another thing. So this is a November shot of the greenhouse. So I've got tomatoes and basil in November. If I didn't have a greenhouse, this would be the most insane thing to do in the world, because I would be getting that hard freeze coming up in December or January, right around the time I'd actually be able to harvest some of this stuff. So in the greenhouse, that allows me to really push things when other people aren't growing them, and it allows me to keep them protected from the frost and stuff like that. And again, show up to market in January with tomatoes, people lose their mind. So, okay, again, don't freak out. I'm going to take another sip, coffee or tea, whatever I have in here, and I'll tell you about the crop plan. Okay, so this is where like the rubber hits the road. So this is where we take that knowledge of our markets that we merge with the knowledge of what can grow and what we think we can grow well, and we put it all together. And I also merge it with obviously that bio-intensive growing method. So if you want to just see so how this works. So a crop plan is basically divided into space and time. So our space is running down. These are my bed numbers, and this just means greenhouse. and then time is going this way. So what I have here is, like, for example, on bed 11, I've got radishes planted, and then I'm harvesting radishes, and then I clear that bed and I plant lettuces right after it. And here I've got beets planted, harvesting, and then I'm planting turnips as soon as they're cleared. This is kale, so kale is more of a continuous harvest, so I don't have to clear that. But again, that's just how I work out my crop plan. This is just Tetris, just like play Tetris, see how many crops you can get fitting in there, and then you're going to be on your way to getting that maximum yield out of your land. So that's a crop plan. Again, yours can look however you want it to look, but that's just kind of how mine looks. And that's like the culmination of all those things we were just talking about. This is really where I start saying, okay, I'm going to sow these trays at this day. I'm going to plant them, and then I'm going to harvest them on this day. And then I'm going to have these succession plantings. So I'm going to have beets. As soon as this beet bed is out, this next beet bed under it's going to be harvested. As soon as that one's out, this one's going to be harvested. And that way I know, looking down these rows at any week, I won't be bombarded by any crop, but I also will have a little bit of a crop to go take to market. I hope that makes sense. And then just sexy photos of plants, all this is. So we have head lettuces here on the left, intercropped with scallions. We've got some kale here on the right, intercropped with radishes up under it, with chard over here to the left. Oh yeah. So you're happy because you're not stressed out about money because you're making money. All right. So this is where it all comes together. You're not sitting there looking at these beds of lettuce that no one wants to buy. You're not sitting there looking at, that weird kohlrabi crop that you decided to grow and no one wants. And I'm not saying you shouldn't grow those weird things. Like, I like picking on kohlrabi for some weird reason, but grow what you want to grow and what you're passionate about growing, but just, keep it in your back pocket and make sure they're not just costing you your farm, is all I'm saying. Again, I don't want to come off as like too much of a capitalist, but just like, I want your farms to succeed. Okay, so we've made it through that part of the presentation. So now we're just going to talk about some infrastructure. This is another one of my favorite things about market gardening is the infrastructure can be very minimal. You don't have to take a whole lot of loans out. If you're handy at all or know someone who's handy, you can do most of this stuff yourself. So this is my wash pack. You kind of need a wash pack. Maybe if you're growing some crops that don't need to be washed and bagged, you might have an easier time getting away with not having one of these. But for me, I did a lot of salad greens. So I basically have, this is a bubbler with a jacuzzi jet that basically fills up with water. I wash the greens, put them into this washing machine that I got off Craigslist. I sterilized it before I use it, sterilize it, straight wired it, and then basically this spins the greens and dries them off. Then they go into the drying rack, and then they're bagged. So basic wash pack situation here. Nothing too fancy. This is literally, I made this out of the horse shed that was on the property before. I just framed it up and put some insulation in, and then that's about it. So root washing station. So very simple, just a table with a rubber mat to wash everything with. And you can also get fancy with it. You can build an entire building for this, especially if you have a big farm. I would suggest doing something a little bit more legit. And you can kind of go as big as you want. Cold storage, very underestimated thing. We want to be able to compete against the big box stores with produce. And one of the best ways that local farms can compete is shelf life. So I'm able to date my salad bags for like 15 or 16 days after I bag them, and people go crazy for it. They constantly are mentioning how fresh it stays compared to the Walmart stuff and how much better it tastes and all those things that we want. But to do that, I need to get it cold fast. I need to wash it properly. I need to bag it. I need to get it cold, get that field heat off of it. And that's extremely important. So cold storage is a biggie. Plant nursery, you don't have to have a plant nursery. You could direct seed everything, but if you're direct seeding everything, your crop plan is gonna be a little more stretched out, because then you're not able to throw that lettuce transplant in the ground when that radish bed comes out of production. You're gonna have to seed those lettuces and wait for them to hopefully come up. You're gonna have more pest problems then as well. What you want to do is have some big healthy plants that are going into the ground, and they're going to be able to outcompete pests, including weeds. They're going to be able to outcompete all those things and give you a yield faster. So just two examples of a plant nursery, nothing too fancy. And this was like my first plant nursery. So this was when I was growing in Vail on a really small, very small scale. You don't have to be fancy. This is just me starting seeds under grow lights in my house. So yeah, there's that. Okay, so market garden tools. I'll kind of try to go through these pretty quick, but some of them are really cool. So this is called a quick cut greens harvester. It's probably my favorite tool out there. It's got a little reciprocating blade that works through a power drill, and then these tassels throw those cut greens into this little cloth bag, and then you dump that. It saves me about 5 hours of work a week, so it paid for itself very quickly. A common thing
I'm gonna go find Bigfoot and I'm gonna kill him.
So I didn't catch that, but most modern market garden tools are going to be able to fit about a 30-inch wide bed, because that's what most market garden beds are. They're like 30 inches wide. So this is a 15-inch tool, so it's just 2 passes, clears your bed. The simpler the better. You don't want anything too fancy, because fancy usually means expensive as well. Low upfront investment, again, especially compared to larger farmer operations. And again, the reoccurring theme here is just trying to increase that efficiency in your common garden tasks. Okay. And that's really what can help you trim that crop budget down and trim your labor down so that you're making as much money as possible. All right. Market garden tools. So another one, my garden cart. I love my garden cart. I built it, obviously. It can straddle a 30-inch bed. It's got tall walls for shading totes that are full of produce, so they're not getting hot. It's got little fancy tool holders. I'm easily amused, obviously. I think this is fancy, so I'm a cheap date. All right. A little bit more advanced market garden tool is a BCS walk behind tractor. So this is very simple. It is basically just a Honda motor that has a PTO that drives implements that can fit onto it. It has multiple implements, tons of them, from like snow blowers to lawn mowers and all kinds of stuff with it. But it's a very simple tool. It's pretty bulletproof. So here you see, this is a flail mower. So it's mowing down our cover crop that we do in the summer, so that we can tarp it and terminate that cover crop. And then this is a power harrow. It kind of works like a tiller, but it's a minimal soil disturbance. So it's just the top couple inches. All right. I'll burn through these pretty quick so we can get to the questions. Market garden tool. Another one is a precision seeder. This thing's pretty cool. It's a Jang, JP1 is what it's called. It's a Korean seeder, which uses these little plates to very precisely plant seeds at any density you want, which is a big deal. I do a lot of direct seeding, and organic seed is very expensive. So it paid for itself pretty quick as well. This thing is pretty fancy. So this is called a paper pot transplanter. This is cool because it has trays that you seed, and it has these paper pots that basically come undone as you drag this tool, and it plants it for you. So it like makes a furrow, plants it, and then the wheels press the plant into the ground. You can go to paperpot.co for all that info. It's a cool tool. I don't use it. What I use is primarily hand transplanting. And this is a slide to talk about weed management. So there's precision weeders. That should be kind of like a joke, but it's kind of true. So I made this weeder. I just welded a piece of 9-gauge wire onto the end of a hoe handle, and that distance right there is the exact same distance between my crops. So I just run that wire weeder down the beds, and it makes it very quick versus me trying to get in there with a hoe and get the little spots and having to stop and start and do all that. It's much easier to correctly plant all your plants out into a nice straight rows, and then you can just run that weeder down it and keep your farm weed free. Another thing is silage tarps. So these are tarps that can do a lot of things, but primarily they will help kill or smother any weed pressure that starts getting high. More weeders. This is a flame weeder. It's kind of cool. I had one of those. It was a really cool tool for terminating weeds that are coming up before your crop comes up. And this is a little electric motor powered like weeder, which is also really cool. And then the last two tools I'm going to talk about is this book right here that I referenced. And then this is the most important tool. He's my dog. And a good farm truck. You need both those things. That's pretty much it. We can get to the questions now if y'all have. If you have any questions that are more detailed that we don't get time for, feel free to email me. Yeah, so let me know. I hope this was helpful. And yeah, let me know if you got any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tommie, for that wonderful presentation. We did get a few questions. So one was people were wondering if they could get like a copy of your slides.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
What do you you want me to send them to you, and then we can
Yeah,
figure it out how to send it
you
to
can
everybody?
send it to me and then I'll just have everybody email me and then I can send it.
Cool.
But of course, you also have your contact information as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the other question was about the name of the book, but I think we put that link in Amazon. Perfect. But yeah, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. You can unmute yourselves and ask them yourself. Of course, we also have Tommie's contact information. You all have my contact information. So anyway.
Hi, Tommie.
Hey.
My name is Laura. We've actually been in communication. I work for New Roots.
Oh yeah, hey.
So this is really amazing because this is basically you've been running your farm entirely by yourself, right?
I had a part-time like apprentice for the past year that I got through the UA Cooperative Extension Apprentice
Okay.
Program. But yeah, I'm basically back to doing it myself now, and it's about 35 hours a week that I spend on the farm.
Okay, this is great. Yeah, I wanted to, most of the people that are in our program are definitely don't have resources to like hire people. So I love that I'm going to share some stuff that you posted to let people know that it is possible to do these things on your own.
Yeah.
And using tools like the transplanting tool was really amazing. So thanks for all this
Yeah.
information.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, another question we got in the chat is, can you talk about how you use your tarps on your farm and what have you done or changed over time behind branding at the market or table presentation, if you've done anything in that way to attract people to your booth?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start with the tarps. So again, this is a silage tarp. You can get them to whatever size you want. It's right behind the quick cut greens harvester in terms of my favorite tool. And it doesn't look like a tool because it's just a big plastic tarp, but it has a white side and a black side. And one of the things I use it for probably most commonly is I will take the flail mower from the BCS and I'll run through a bed of like spent greens that maybe got too many aphids on them or that are bolting that I'm done with. And instead of cutting all those greens out and trying to compost them here in the desert, which is kind of like a lost cause, if someone can compost in the desert, more power to you. So what I do is I just cut all that organic matter, throw it down. It ends up looking like a mulch. And then I come through, I mean, you can actually see here. So in the farm here, the first thing we did was do a cover crop. So this is actually me terminating this, tarping it, and then all that organic matter stays put instead of volatilizing. That's probably the biggest thing I use it for, is just like terminating crops or cover crops. And then another cool thing I use it for is helping with direct seeding. So my soil dries out quickly. In the summertime, I like to put the white side up on the tarp so it actually keeps the soil a little bit cooler, because I do mostly cool season crops. And it keeps the moisture just right. It keeps the weeds killed that try to emerge before the crop. And it also just gives you better germination, because basically you're able to just have that perfect moisture, and you're not having to come and hand water that bed 4 or 5 times a day. And yeah, that's like the main things I use the silage tarps for. And then in terms of farmers market booth, changing it up, not a lot. I can find this again. So it still pretty much looks like that. I learned in California how to like display and do farmers market booths. It's just stack it high and watch it fly. That's what you think the whole time when you're setting up a farmers market. You want to stack it as high as it can possibly go, make everything clearly labeled so people know what stuff is. And then price wise, I haven't had to change much. There's a couple of the bag grains that I started noticing were taking a bit too long for me to like sort and pack. So that was taking more labor. And so I wanted to try to pay myself fairly. So we went up from like $5 a bag to $6 a bag for like the baby lettuce mix. Everything else, we've been able to stay the same despite inflation. That's another kind of good thing I didn't mention about the small scale market garden. I think that it requires much less outside inputs. So you're able to kind of be a stronger standalone business versus businesses that are relying on a lot of huge inputs or things like that, if that makes sense. But to answer your question, we haven't really changed much since we started.
Awesome. Another question we got is, how often are you doing farmers markets to sell your produce? And is most of your income coming from the farmers markets or prearranged sales to restaurants and other sorts of things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I basically do my crop planning at the beginning of the year, and I will reach out to the wholesalers that I know of. So Pivot Produce here in Tucson is great. Tucson CSA is great. And also the food bank is really cool. They actually do crop planning with farmers. And then you can, what I try to do, especially after the first year when I had those contacts, and then whenever I showed that I could consistently provide produce, those places want local produce. They just want to make sure it's consistent. So as soon as you prove consistency, then you can start getting those prearranged contracts. Even though you do take a wholesale cut, usually it's about 15 or 20% cut, but that means that I don't have to stress about a rainy day at the farmer's market costing us, sales that week or something like that. And so what our sales look like now is about 80% goes to wholesalers, and then 20%, which is just technically my buffer crop. So if I have extra, then I go to a farmer's market. That way I know I've met my contract. Those people are happy. I've sold most of my produce. And then if I happen to have some extra, I get a little bump, and I get a retail price for that stuff. So, and we go to Rincon Valley every Saturday. We try to go every Saturday. And then I've started doing Rito on Sundays every now and then, but usually just one farmer's market a week is enough.
Awesome. Another person has asked, they are asking if they can ask if how you get health insurance.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so through whenever I was doing the farm, basically being married and having a spouse that had those benefits was how I got health insurance. So that's definitely $1 million question. I think if I could wave a magic wand and pass any bill, I would give all farmers like free health care. Obviously I'm a bit biased, but yeah, it seems kind of like a no-brainer, because it's tough. It's a very physically demanding job, and yeah, having healthcare is definitely something that needs to be on your mind. So yeah.
Awesome. Does anyone have any more questions that they'd like to ask? These are awesome, great questions this
Yeah.
month. What would your advice be for the beginning market garden farmer?
Just watch this presentation like over and over. No, beginning market farmer, I would say just try to get high quality information like that, which is a very nebulous thing to say. But you know, that book, Richard Wiswall's book, another amazing book is John Martin Fortier. He's a Canadian market farmer, and he does, I think his is the, oh crap, I forgot the name of that book. But look up John Martin Fortier, Elliot Coleman, the new organic farmer or grower, I think it is. He's like been doing it for like 50 years before organic was even a thing. So Elliot Coleman's an amazing resource. There's a bunch on YouTube. The No-Till Growers YouTube channel is awesome with Jesse Frost, and also they have tons of podcasts out that are really good reference podcasts. So you just want to make sure you don't end up with like, you know, Joe Blow down the street, like telling you like how you need to be growing your onions every time. When I honestly, it's like when you see someone who's like 100%, like this is how you got to do it, probably don't listen to that person. Just like there's a lot of nuance in growing, especially in context of like where you're at, what your market can supply and demand, and yeah, just make sure you get like good info. And there's plenty of free info out there. It's like an amazing thing about it. You can learn a lot through these free resources. So yeah, that's kind of a halfway answer, but hopefully that helps.
Okay. And then somebody was also asking about liability insurance.
Yeah, that's really good questions. Yeah, this is stuff that I didn't think of at all until I was here. Yeah, so I get liability. I'm zoned for agriculture where my farm is located. So we're zoned for ag, and I basically just get liability insurance through my home for injuries on the farm for guests. So that covers like people coming onto the farm because I do farm tours every now and then, and I just wanted to make sure I was covered there. And I'm an LLC, so to me it was worth it to do an LLC versus sole proprietorship at the beginning because it does give me that little bit of separation in terms of liability, and that way people can't like sue me directly. They would just sue Moonlighter and only be able to take what Moonlighter has. So that's the kind of difference between an LLC and a sole proprietorship. The way I understand it, I'm definitely not an expert on it, but that's that. And then, and then even I think in terms of food poisoning or any type of liability like that, get food safety certified. I think it's actually a free certification. If you sell a certain amount of produce, I think $250,000 or more over 3 years or something like that. I can't remember the numbers, but if you're a substantial grower, the state will force you to get that training, that food safety training. But for me, I did it for free. And I did it because I wanted to do it to make sure that I was doing everything I could to make sure that my product was safe to eat. And then, but yeah, no, I do have farm insurance. I'm trying to remember now. I haven't paid the premium in a while. So I'll remember it whenever I get like I think it's like $500 or $600 a year for like all of my liability coverage for the farm. So yeah, it's not a lot, but it's not a little either, I guess.
All righty. Awesome. Awesome questions, everyone. Thank you so much. Also, Tommie, I just wanted to mention, since you mentioned Jean Martin, we have some exciting news coming soon. So don't forget to follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our newsletter, and save the date for September 4th and 5th for that exciting news coming out.
Nice.
Yeah. And Thank you everyone else for attending this month's Urban Ag Hour. We hope you all enjoyed it and we can't wait for next month's. The survey was posted in the chat, so please remember to take that and just give us some feedback on it. And that concludes this month, and we hope to see you next month. Everyone have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much, Tommie.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you all.